Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees Killers of the Flower Moon, the new film from Martin Scorsese, projected right now to open in the #1 spot, unless, of course, the Taylor Swift Eras Concert Tour film is able to once again claim that #1 spot. Right now, we've got some different numbers, some different projections coming from Box Office Pro versus what we're getting from Deadline and other so-called industry experts. So we'll talk about that and also what Killers of the Flower Moon needs to be able to do to recoup its massive $200 million budget that has been projected out there. And of course, we'll give some other updates before getting further. Please make sure you smash that like button, loud at the fire button, smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time your video or live stream goes live on the channel. So Killers of the Flower Moon, this is a collaboration between Paramount and Apple. So at some point, Killers of the Flower Moon will be available on Apple TV+. It's not going to be available right away. And I don't know off the top of my head when exactly it's going to be on Apple TV+. Maybe it'll be mentioned in the article over at Deadline today. But the point is that it will be a theatrical exclusive, at least for a little bit. Killers of the Flower Moon, though, is projected, according to Box Office Pro, to be seeing a domestic opening of $35.4 million. And though that sounds okay for a movie that's over 3 hours long, well over 3 hours long, talk about a 3-hour tour, it is still not nearly going to be enough, at least initially, to make up for that $500 million it needs to make. So obviously, when we recognize that the film cost $200 million, again, break even roughly going to be somewhere between $500 and $600 million, depending on what metrics that you are using. And when you're having that kind of a start off domestically for a film that is much more likely going to appeal to a domestic audience versus an international audience, and you don't have something like the Barbenheimer effect going on, I don't think that you're going to see a similar thing. So I think some people might be thinking, well, Oppenheimer was able to do it. That film was really, really long, and that film ended up, grossing well over $900 million. But there's a couple things with that. One, the time of year in which Oppenheimer got a release, where that became a film that more people had the opportunity to go and see, coming out at this point in October for Killers of the Flower Moon, especially when you are, again, very vocally and very clearly has been promoted as an Apple TV exclusive. If you're someone like me and I'm looking at a movie like this and I'm like, look, I have a child that just is about to turn 4 weeks. I had a toddler that turned 3 last week. I look at a movie like this and I'm like, I don't know when I could actually go to see it in theaters. I would love to see it in theaters. I would love to have that experience of seeing it in theaters. And I think that it's even getting some IMAX showings as well and some more premium format screens. But at the same time, I'm like, look, it's a 3-hour plus movie. I think I might actually just wait for it to come out on Apple TV Plus, because then I can start the film when I need to. I can pause it. I can come back to it if I need to, if something's happening at home. And I'm wondering how much of an impact that potentially could have, especially for the market that this movie is going to be appealing to, which is going to be primarily an adult demographic. And though the older, more retired generation could end up showing up in this for this movie and not having to worry about the issues of kids and schedules, we also know that market has not really shown up all that much and not that consistently ever since the pandemic really started. And so I think that Killers of the Flower Moon could potentially be in some financial trouble if these numbers hold out and if there's not some massive legs for it, which is very sad, because as someone who's a pretty big fan of Scorsese, was not a big fan of his last film that he did with Netflix, The Irishman. But overall, when I look at his filmography, there's a lot of films that I like and a lot of films that are some of my favorite films of all time. I do have to ask the question of whether or not there's going to be any financial viability to this movie. Speaking of financial viability, or in this case, financial success, we're looking at the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. What's interesting is that according to Box Office Pro, they are projecting the film to drop 64%. And I will say that sounds about right to me. I mentioned this in my previous video that I thought that you were going to see a pretty massive drop-off for this film because it is a concert movie, right? It's a film that's an event film, and a lot of times with these event films that are not, narratives and where you don't have an audience that's going to be able to really be built upon. I mean, the only people really going to see this movie are going to be those that are fans of Taylor Swift, right? Are the Swifties, and you might have some return viewing, and I think that's why you're seeing a projected drop-off of around 64%. But still, you're seeing that drop-off nonetheless, as I thought was going to happen. It'll be interesting to see just how high that drop-off actually is, though, because the initial numbers, right, they were projecting initially for the domestic to be well over $100 million and ended up coming in underneath that. So I'm also wondering if the drop might actually be higher than what they are saying. Either way, the film has already made its money back. It's already continuing to add money to the millions of dollars that have already been made by the Swifts in regards to the actual initial tour and they, of course, have already made and recouped any money they spent on the filming and distribution of the actual film itself. The Exorcist Believer is coming into another weekend, another 43% drop there. And again, film is making money individually, but Universal is still looking at this saying, oh boy, why did we spend $400 million on an IP that's not going to get us to $400 million anytime soon? Paw Patrol the Mighty movie continuing to hang around as well. Saw 10 also hanging out. And unfortunately, the creator, it's looking like it's going to be moving out of more and more screens. And so that ultimately means that the film is just not going to have a very good chance of making its money back. And it's sad because it is a pretty solid movie. Also, I will mention here that The Night Before Christmas 30th Anniversary Edition is coming out, and right now expected around $1.4 million. So for a film that has, came out 30 years ago, coming out at around 1,500 screens, hey, that's a pretty good showing for that. And it's interesting how well, especially per theater ratios go when it comes to older films versus some of the newer stuff that we have been seeing more recently. So going over to Deadline, as I mentioned, there's some slight differences there. So Box Office Pro thinks around 64%, whereas if you look at what the people at Deadline, the so-called experts, are saying over there, it's projected to be somewhere between 60 and 70% of a drop in the second weekend. So again, not completely far removed from where you have right now. If you take the average, basically, of Box Office Pro's numbers, that would be roughly 65% of, rather this would be 65% on average, and Box Office Pro's was 64%, so it's not too far off there. But their second weekend projection is $27 to $37 million. And again, I would not be surprised to see it skew higher towards the 70%, mostly again because you're not going to see a lot of new people coming out, and though return viewers absolutely can drive a movie and can drive the overall totals of a film, I kind of wonder how many people just went to go see it that one time, had fun, and have no plans to do it again, and also how many of them, maybe if they were return viewers, did that all opening weekend, which contributed to it being that much of a success. All right, it goes on here to mention that the Apple original film, so again, big factor here, which is why I think it could end up, having an impact on the total box office. It says right here that it is going to be looking at $20 to $25 million in its opening weekend, opening with tracking for a while. That would be mind-blowing for a 3-hour and 26 movie Western drama that's getting released in the midst of the actor strike, which has prevented stars from tub thumping their picks. So Tony over at Deadline, good old Tony, he always loves to bring this up as if the actors going out and promoting their movies somehow makes that much of a difference. I mean, keep in mind, if you look at the box office prior to the strike and after the strike, the numbers are very, very similar, right? The vast majority of movies are losing money because they're spending way too much on it. And what an actor has to say about a film really doesn't move the needle all that much. I mean, let's just be honest here. Most people these days don't wait for an actor to tell them, hey, go see my movie. Right? It's going to be typical marketing that you would have in trailers. It would also be typical word of mouth as well. Word of mouth has become even that much more prominent in today's world. And so, yeah, I do think that it is something that is being kind of overstated here by them. It goes on to say that such conceived tentpoles as New Regency's The Creator were impacted greatly by the strike. And again, who's to say? Like, honestly, can you honestly argue that The Creator is doing worse because of the strike? I honestly think that The Creator is doing pretty well in comparison to the strike, because this is a film that it's an original idea, it's an original film. There's nothing really, big going on as far as ideas. Like, it's the kind of movie essentially that it plays like an indie film, but it actually cost $80 million. So to try to argue that, again, I would love to see what kind of metrics they're using to say, oh, well, it would have made this amount of money. There's just no way of knowing that, and there's just no indication that it would have made that much of a difference if the strike wasn't actually going on. It goes on to say, why so optimistic on Killers of the Flower Moon? Analysts are bullish on the DiCaprio factor of it in all regards. To the draw of the marketing campaign that has been everywhere, a $20+ million opening here would also be a notable start. But here's, again, the big problem is that that is a good start for a movie like this, and a good start for a movie that's 3 hours and 26 minutes, but that's not a good start for a film that cost $200 million. And this is something that oftentimes gets lost on these people, right? Yes, even the film has very, very good legs. When your starting point is as low in the 20s of millions of dollars, you're still seeing probably close to a 50% drop in week 2. So now you're seeing another $10 million there. So where does this film, and what is the pathway for this film starting off at $20 million to get to $100 million domestically? And that's just talking domestically, right? If you're saying the film's going to get to $100 million, maybe $150 million domestic, and at this point, based on that kind of an opening, that's pretty generous. Are you expecting it to do $350 million overseas? I just, again, I don't see where they are possibly getting this understanding from. And again, Tony is a little bit kooky at times as well. It goes on to also mention how the Napoleon, the other film coming from Apple is also going to be Napoleon, and that's going to be coming to theaters on November 22nd. And let me see if I can find quickly when the film is going to be coming out on to the Apple TV Plus. It says no Apple TV Plus streaming date has been set for Killers of the Flower Moon, as guaranteed long theatrical window is planned due to award season. And again, it is Scorsese, and so I imagine that he probably had that deal worked out with them. And so because of that, you might have a lot of people saying, you know what, if this is going to be set up for award season anyway, and it's going to be coming to Apple TV, and it's 3 hours and 26 minutes, and it's not a film I need to see right now, guess what? Maybe I'll just have to wait off on it. Maybe I'll just wait for it to come on Apple TV and just do that instead. I know that's kind of probably where I am, because I, again, as a parent, I can't think of a time when I would be able to dedicate 3 hours and 26 minutes out of the house. Away from my family, away from my kids. I just can't quite understand that happening. And that $200 million budget, I think, is going to be a pretty big deal. So this initial number was being reported by the likes of Variety. I believe this is where the number initially came from, but this is the early number, $200 million. So again, a epic movie. Clearly, Scorsese getting a lot of money himself, having a lot of money as well. But that means that it needs to make $500 to $600 million just to be able to break even. And a $25 million domestic opening is just not going to actually cut it. Where you have films like Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, which already made a lot of money up front because of it being a musical event, only spending about $20 million or so to actually get the production of the filming crew and all that other stuff that you would spend on that, any post-production, all that stuff, right? The fact that film cost around $20 million, guess what? That film's already seeing profits because of that. But at a $25 million start, at $200 million of a budget, I'm sorry, I just don't understand, and I do not see how Tony could possibly try to argue that there is any bright future for this movie based on the numbers that we're seeing. And again, we could potentially see the film do insane numbers in the stretch, right? Have massive holds every single week, do very well against other competition. We could see the film somehow blow up overseas as well. It's a American Western 3 hour 26 minute movie that does not have an Oppenheimer effect. I just do not think that they have a lot of evidence to suggest the film is doing well, or that a $20 million plus opening, again, I think what they're doing, and this is something that they have been notorious for doing, is that they're nitpicking here, or rather they're doing selective focus. They're saying, well, look, it's really good of an opening for a 3 hour plus movie, but we're just going to ignore the fact that it cost around $200 million. And I think that is just not being genuine, and I think it's something that needs to be called out. But those are the numbers as they stand. What do you think? Are you seeing Killers of the Flower Moon? Are you going to sit through the 3 hours and 26 minutes of this movie? And again, I'm looking forward to it. I love Scorsese, and I think the trailers for this have looked really good. I think that DiCaprio is usually great in Scorsese movies, and so I'm very excited to see that. I'm really hoping that Scorsese is able to kind of redeem himself after The Irishman, which I just did not think was very good. But at the same time, I don't think I'm going to be going out to the theater to actually go and see it, just because of practical reasons, right? I just don't think I'll have the time to dedicate 3.5 hours outside of my house. And so are you going to see it in theaters? Are you going to wait for it to come out on streaming? Let me know in the comment section down below, and also about any of the other films that we mentioned as well. Again, please make sure that you smash that like button, loud at the farm, and smash the rumble button. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members: Father Luca Illich, Laura, the Mother Major General's Story, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel by the name Eagle Rider, Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. Also to Matt317, check out his Twitch channel of the same name. Mr. Roy and ZK Man, check him out over at xtheboundaries.co. Thank you very much for being my chosen members this month. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, also access to a podcast, access to a giveaways channel, and tons of other stuff, go check out to be a member today in the links in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.